So got myself a little peppermint tea. Was gonna have a coffee, but it is actually like 6:30 in the evening, so I feel like if I have a coffee at this time, the caffeine is just gonna keep me awake. So I mean, to be fair, does peppermint tea have caffeine in? I feel like it doesn't. I feel like green tea has caffeine in, but not peppermint. Anyway, might be keeping myself awake with this anyway, but yeah. So for today's video, I wanted to kind of just sit down, chat about basically my experience renting versus my experience purchasing a house and sort of living in a house that we own, because I feel like both have pros and cons. Oh, that was my phone. And the reason we have the option to rent versus the option to buy is because buying doesn't suit everyone, renting doesn't suit everyone. So I kind of wanted to touch on my experience. So prior to purchasing this house, me and Jasper lived in a flat together for 6 months. So it's kind of just like a short-term contract. And honestly, it did teach us a lot. Loads of like things that we learn about sort of living together, whether we could live together, whether we could sort of budget together. Like, we learned so many things about it. So I kind of wanted to chat through my experience of renting and also talk about what it's like to actually own your own house in comparison to renting. So that is what we're going to chat about today. So let's get into today's video. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is that renting actually taught us so much, from actually realizing that we are happy to live together, we can live together, we can budget our money well. I feel like if I went straight into buying a house with Jasper, like, it would have been kind of like a different story, and it would have been a lot scarier, because I feel like renting, after 6 months you could back out sort of thing. And that's the nice thing about renting, it's not long term. Yes, you do invest money into living there, but it's not like the upfront cost that you pay for buying a house, and you don't have to resell it if you decide you don't want to live there anymore. Like, there is so many good things about renting when it comes to testing whether you can live with someone. Like, I think that is such an important thing, and I've heard it a couple of times where couples buy a house together, never lived properly together before. Like, I feel like a lot of couples live together but between their parents' house, and that's something that me and Jasper did. Like, I'd stay at his house at the weekend, he'd stay at my house in the week, so we were basically staying in the same house like every day. But it's so different when you wanna actually have your own place where you've got to pay bills, you've got to cook dinner every single night, you've got to do all your washing, there's so many different chores you've got to do, as well as paying for it all. And I feel like it's such a different experience to just living at home and living between each other's houses. Like, for a relationship, I definitely recommend renting somewhere together before you purchase somewhere, just so you know that you can tolerate that person quite a lot. So I feel like renting before you buy it is just such a good test, and really, before you live with someone, you really just don't know them as well as you do when you actually live with them. So definitely recommend, if you're in a relationship or you want to move in with a friend, or you want to buy a house with a friend or something like that, just rent before you buy it, because it's such a good test. You can back out and you haven't invested as much money as you would when you buy. So the next thing that I kind of noticed from renting versus buying is that my rent was so much more expensive than purchasing a house. So our rent was actually £200 more expensive than our mortgage, which I think is a considerable amount, bearing in mind that we were living in a 2-bed flat, and now we're living in a 2-bed detached house with a garden, parking, like everything. So I really think that is something to take into consideration. And also with a mortgage, you have more flexibility. Like, you can extend your mortgage to be like 35 years and only pay like a small amount. So crazy the flexibility you have with a mortgage, and obviously over a longer period you would pay more interest, but you have that flexibility to be able to lower your mortgage payments. And I don't know, I just feel like you have much more control over how much you want to pay a month when you actually have a mortgage and you're paying for your own home, rather than renting, where renting tends to stay the same, or it tends to go up if you're there for a long period of time. So definitely something to take into consideration is that for us, rent was a lot more expensive than our mortgage. Yes, we have a couple more things to pay out for now. Like, we have a lot more insurances because this is our own home and stuff like that. The next thing that a lot of people say, and to be honest, I thought this as well, is that when you rent a house, a lot of the time white goods is supplied, which is basically your fridge, freezer, it's your washing machine, it's your dishwasher, it's all stuff like that. And a lot of the time if you're renting, if that breaks, then the landlord will replace it for you. This actually happened to us in the flat. So one day I was washing my clothes in the washing machine and the washing machine literally broke. Like, it just mid-wash, it just stopped working. And so obviously the next day we rang up the landlord and he said, yeah, that's fine, we can replace the dishwasher. Well, he actually sent out someone to see if it could be repaired, but it couldn't be repaired, so we ended up getting it replaced. And honestly, the washing machine that he replaced it with was the most horrendous washing machine. For a wash, the shortest wash you could do was 3 hours long. Like, it was horrendous. It was so clunky. The buttons literally didn't even work properly. It was like the pad would like push in, the whole thing would push in when you pushed any buttons. It was just horrendous. And 100%, if that was my house, I would not have bought that washing machine, but you don't get a choice. So the good thing is that if something goes wrong in a rented household, you generally can just get the landlord to replace it, whereas in your own home you do have to pay out for it. But from our experience renting, that we didn't get a washing machine that we liked. It was just an inconvenience. Like, in that situation, I much preferred to have paid for the washing machine myself so I could have one that I actually liked. So that's just one thing to take consideration, is that sometimes they just want to give you the cheap stuff and that's not always what you want, but you kind of have no choice when you're renting. But yeah, you do save some money because you don't have to pay out for stuff like that. So there's kind of like pros and cons to it, to be honest. Like, if that doesn't bother you, then yeah, that probably suits you. But for us, it was like, yeah, this is so irritating having to wait. Like, we get in from work at like, I don't know, 7, and if we put on washing as soon as we get home, it wouldn't be ready till like 10 p.m. and like, who wants to be hanging up washing at 10 p.m? Not me. Now, similar to that, because when you purchase your own home, you can pretty much do what you like to it. Like, you can put up pictures and don't have to ask for permission. You can do stuff to the garden and you don't need to ask anyone, which you do have a lot more freedom when you purchase a house. But I found that obviously, because we own our own house, we want to do so many things to it, like getting the decking, getting outdoor garden furniture, and I don't know, doing just so many different extra things. And it kind of works out, you end up paying out a lot to get the house the way you want it, whereas I feel like when you rent, you kind of just accept the house for what it is and you don't really do much to it because you don't own it. Like, because you have a lot of freedom when you're purchasing and you own your own house, you tend to just spend more anyway just because you can. So that's another thing to take into consideration. Like, if we had been renting this house, no way would we have done all the things we do, and we probably wouldn't have got permission to do half of them. But like, if we were renting, we would have saved so much more money just from the fact that we spent out on so much because we own this house. So, but then also you could kind of see it as like an investment. Like, I don't know how much value sort of like adding a shed and decking and stuff would add to a house, but that could be an investment and could increase the property price. So it's kind of like that's kind of like a tricky one. Like, yes, if we were renting, we wouldn't have done as much stuff, so we would have saved more money. But yeah, but then we've got the house with the way we like it. So I don't know, I thought that was a point to make though, that you kind of do less stuff to a house when you rent it because you can't, and also because it's not your house. The next thing a lot of people talk about when renting is that you have the freedom to move. You could just go get a rental for 6 months and then move on. So you kind of have the freedom to move, and you're not bound to a specific location. Whereas when you purchase a house, it feels a lot more kind of permanent, and you feel like you're going to be there for a couple of years before you move. Now, I disagree with that, because for me personally, I do not like moving. I find it an absolute hassle. Like, it's just the most time consuming thing. Like, it's just a pain, and I personally would want to find somewhere that I really like, stick there for a couple of years and then decide to move on, rather than every 6 months or every year just moving somewhere different. So that kind of really depends on your personality. I mean, good on you if you like moving a lot and you want to try out different areas and places like that. But for me, like, I quite like having a base and somewhere where I feel settled. And like, when you rent, the landlord could kick you out at the end of your lease. Like, imagine if you really liked a house, you loved living there, and then in 6 months time the landlord's just going to kick you out. So I feel like it's definitely something to take into consideration, is that yes, you have the freedom to move about where you want, but like 9 times out of 10 I just don't think anyone would really move that much to like warrant, I don't know. I mean, let me know your opinions. Like, would you rent because you can move around a lot? Personally, for me, I don't like moving. I quite like finding a place where all my friends are, my family are, and I just like having my own base. And I think that's the thing I appreciate now that we have our own house, is we can do what we want with it. It's in a location that we absolutely love, and there's sort of no reason to move. Like, I personally couldn't think of a reason that we would move unless like our family moved away or we got a new job somewhere else. Like, I feel like actually that's a situation where if your job is one where you have to move locations all the time, then renting would probably suit you better. But for me, I don't want to move about. So, and also with us, if worst case scenario is that if we did want to move somewhere, we'd probably still own this house. We'd probably just rent it out and get someone else to live in it while we're away or renting somewhere else. So it's kind of more of an investment than anything else. So yeah, you kind of do still have that option. It's a lot harder than just sort of handing in your notice on your rental, but there are still possibilities there. And end of the day, you could just put your house up for sale. I mean, if you did really want to move about a lot, but I feel like if you moved about a lot, like that would be so expensive when you own your own house and you're purchasing different homes. Like, that's kind of not really a possibility, but yeah. Now, another thing I wanted to touch on is paying rent. You aren't really invested in much. Yes, you have a place to live, but if you rent your whole life, you're gonna be paying that rent till you die, basically. Like, so say me and Jasper lived in this house till we were 46 and we didn't move anywhere, our mortgage rate stayed the same, our payments stayed the same, we had exactly the same everything, same mortgage. We would have paid off our mortgage when we're 46. So by the time we're like 50, we would be mortgage free. All we would be paying for is bills and stuff like that. So I think that's one thing to consider, is that do you really want to be paying rent until you're like 80? Or would you prefer to have something that you've invested in and then you pay off after a certain amount of time, and then you have this base that you own and you have value? And yes, you do pay a lot of interest, but I think the long-term value you get out of purchasing your own home in terms of an investment is that by the time you're older, like, you're not having to pay out on rent or anything like that. So that's just one thing to take into consideration as well. So one of the most annoying things for us about renting was getting our deposit back at the end. Now, our deposit was quite a considerable amount of money, and honestly, it was so difficult to get any money back. Like, he was trying to get money out of us from that deposit, which was absolutely horrendous. Like, I don't know how. We left the flat in such a good condition. We cleaned it all. We basically did everything that we needed to do to get our deposit back. And in our first inventory, we put in all the little details of everything. There were a few sort of ones that we kind of like missed out, but we didn't really think were that necessary. Sort of, there were like brown marks on the carpet and stuff like that that we noticed in the inventory, but apparently additional brown marks had appeared during our time there. And there were just things like dust marks and stuff like that that they were he was trying to claim money for, which he did claim some money. Like, there was just no getting out of it. He wanted to charge us for cleaning and stuff like that. And honestly, if I can find some pictures of the before and after of the floor, like, you guys would be laughing, because he wanted to claim for the dirty kitchen floor, and in the picture there's like one speck of dust. Now, you could have just brought that in on your shoes, you know what I mean? It was like nothing. So that's one thing that we ended up paying out some money at the end and got some money taken away from our deposit for cleaning, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, to be honest, but there you go. So yeah, getting your deposit back at the end is super difficult in some circumstances. Like, if you have a nice landlord, then you probably won't have much trouble, but if you're constantly moving about and doing different rentals, that might add up quite a bit if someone is always trying to claim a bit of money off of your deposit. And I feel like our landlord was just trying to get as much money out of us as possible, which wasn't good. But it's kind of like luck of the draw when you rent. It's like, if you have a nice landlord, you'll be fine, but if you don't, then I wish you all the best of luck. So yeah, that's kind of like the most notable things from renting versus buying, is that buying gives you a lot of freedom to do what you want within the house. You have a lot of freedom over the amount you pay on a mortgage. And yeah, I just feel like personally for me, purchasing a house is the way I want to go, and the fact that I'm on the property ladder so young is really great. Obviously we did like Help to Buy and stuff like that, so definitely check out the video where I talk about how I purchased a house at 21. But yeah, for me, I much prefer purchasing your own house. You can do what you want, you have a lot more fun as well because you haven't got any landlords telling you off for anything you're doing, so there we go. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please leave your opinions down below, what you prefer to do, give any tips to anyone else, and yeah, I hope you did enjoy this little chatty video. Still haven't drunk all my peppermint tea, although it's got a bit cold now, so I might need to put some more hot water in that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did enjoy it, please do give the video a thumbs up, and also subscribe so you don't miss out on any more videos, any sort of more house updates. I want to do a full house tour, like a complete house tour soon. I don't know how far off we are. We've got a few little bits that I want to do, but to be fair, we've made so much progress on the house, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I shall see you all again very soon. Bye.